Hello everyone. I'm going to show you some beginning programming techniques, and I'm going to use a language called Ruby. Now, the reason I'm going to use Ruby is because it's a fairly simple language, especially for beginners, and it has some features which make it quite useful for demonstration, especially for tutorial purposes. So, if you haven't got Ruby on your computer, you can easily download an installer from ruby.org. I'm running a interactive Ruby session, which means I can show you each step of the program after I type it in. Now, the command to run this is IRB, and that stands for Interactive Ruby, basically. So, to get started, now, one way to think about programming is that it runs your program line by line. Now, each line can be something quite simple. For example, 5 plus 5. Now, nothing's going to particularly happen here. However, it will be evaluated, which means the computer will basically calculate it and the result will actually not go anywhere, but that's quite fine for what I want to show you. So I'm just going to hit enter now, and we see 10. So that means the result of this expression is 5 plus 5. Now, in programming terminology, we refer to an expression as something like this, basically, where you are manipulating particular things. In this case, we are manipulating numbers, and often an expression has some sort of output. So in this case, the result, or the output, is 10. Now, let's create a variable. A variable is basically like a little box which can store something. That's a good way of thinking about it for the moment. However, things will get a bit more complicated later on. So let's call our variable sum. So we write sum equals, now let's just do the same thing again, 5 plus 5. So we see 10 again because the expression is exactly the same. And now we know that sum contains the value of 10, or we could just say sum is 10. So if I type sum again, we can see that sum is 10. Now, in computers, they're quite fixated with particular types of data. So in this case, sum is just a number. However, your variables can be many different types, and different languages enforce different sort of levels of type for particular things. One nice thing about Ruby is that it's quite flexible, so I don't need to say that sum is a number straight away. It will just be inferred by the way I'm using it. This has some advantages and disadvantages, but I won't go into them now. So let's try creating a different variable. Let's create, say, my name. So we write name equals. Now, what we're going to create is called a string, which is basically some words in double quotes or single quotes. So now name will be set to Lucas. We can also say name equals Obama, for example, or name equals Bob. So there is some small difference between using single quotes and double quotes, but for the moment it's probably safer to actually use double quotes. So we'll go name equals Lucas. So now name is set to Lucas. If I type name, we can just check that. Now, normally when you're programming, you won't actually be able to see all these intermediate operations directly. So let's make our little program print something out. So we just type in put s, then name. So what is put s? Put s is a function. In this case, it puts the string to the output of the program, which sounds a bit obtuse, but basically it will just print something. And name is the variable we're referring to. So if I press enter, you can see the output is Lucas, That's the output to the screen, however. The thing after this little doodad here is the output of the actual functions. So functions can return things, and usually in Ruby, if nothing bad has happened, they return nil. So nil just basically means nothing, so no error. For example, I can also pass a string directly to put_s, such as put_s hello. So that's the first argument to put_s. And we can even go hello world, then put a space, and then a comma, and then we can even add in like a space. Okay, this is a very silly way of doing it, but I'm just showing you to illustrate multiple arguments, and then we just put my name. So what we've done here is, okay, this is interesting. Why has it done that? Okay. So let's do that slightly differently. Hello world plus name. Okay. So it seems that put_s, when you comma separate arguments, it will write them to a different line. Now that's not what we want. So what we're using is we're adding the strings together. So that's called often that's called the addition operator. I mean, it's plussing it. So adding strings together is a bit different from adding variables together, because strings aren't numbers. So generally we just kind of squish them together and you get a new string. So what we've done here is basically we've joined hello world, which is one string, with a space, which is another string, and with our variable, which in this case is set to Lucas. Now there's actually a smarter way of doing this in Ruby, but not all languages have this, but I'll show you. So we can go put_s hello world hash begin bracket name, end the string like that, and ta-da, it does exactly the same thing, but it's a lot shorter. So what's happened here is that in Ruby it will substitute a variable whenever you write something that looks like this. So it has to be in this particular format. So basically you write something like that and then you put your variable name inside it, and that will substitute the variable, the actual value of the variable, into your output string. So let's just stand back here for a second. So you can see we have a variable which is just a plain number, or we can have a string which is some text. Now what happens when you want to mix them or convert them? Well, the thing is, in Ruby it's quite clever. It will actually convert a number into a string automatically, but you can explicitly do this by using the toS function. toS. So pretty much every object in Ruby, or every variable you can work with in Ruby, you can usually use .to_s on it, which will convert it to a string. See how it's got the quotes around it, so that shows us that it's represented as a string. Now conversely, we can go the other way. So to_i is to integer, and we get 25 without the quotes. That means it's successfully done its magic and turned 25 as a string into 25 as an integer. So this is pretty cool. So let's ask for some input. Let's take some input. So let's go input equals getS. So getS is exactly like put_s, except it's the other way around. You're just getting a string instead of putting a string. So okay, let's assume now we want to put in a number. So let's put in like 256. Now we've just gotten a string, as you can see. So if we look at input, input is a string. Now what's that \n? Well, the thing is, when you use getS, it will take in the enter key, which when you press the enter key, it will take that as well as input, and that gives you the new line character. So that /n is actually one character, but on the screen to us, so we can see it, it's represented as \n. Now we want to get rid of that, so we can use chomp and with an exclamation mark, so that we modify input directly. Okay, now I've got 256. So that's not immediately useful to us, because look what happens if we go like that. If you multiply a string, it will actually just copy the string over like that, or we could do input times 3. So sometimes this could be useful, like if you want to draw like a bar which is like 20 long, you can just go dash, dash string dash times 20. But we want to work with an actual number, so let's convert input into a number. So we're going to create a new variable called number, or num, and then set that to the result of input dot to underscore I. So we're running, basically what's happening is we've got our input variable, and then we're running the to_i function on it, which means, or in object-oriented programming terminology, that's called running a method. So, but I'm not going to try and confuse you with all that stuff. For now, what you should know is that it's going to take input and then convert it to an integer, and then set number to that result. So now our num is 256. It's managed to successfully convert a string to an integer. Now, what do we want to do with num? Well, whatever we want, really. So we could divide it by 2. Now that value is going nowhere, so let's just go result equals num divided by 2. So now result is equal to 128, and then we'll just print it out. Now likewise, we can do the same thing with strings. So let's, in the final part of this tutorial, let's get the user's name and then print it out back to them and say hello, something like that. Or we could even do name and age, but nah, let's not do that for the moment. Let's just take it simple, take it slow. So input equals get s, so we're running the get s function to get a string, and we're going to set input to the result of that. So let's call myself, today I'm going to be called Timothy. Okay, so input is set to Timothy, so you can just see that. Now let's say hello to Timothy. Now if we wrote hello Timothy right here, that would not really be programming, in the sense that we're not responding to the variable that we've got. Therefore we're going to use our variable. But I forgot something. Let's chomp that character. Now many languages have chomp. This function came from a language called Perl, I think, and yeah, it just chomps off the last new line character. So you'll see chomp in many languages, especially when you're dealing with strings. So now let's say hello to our user. Hello Timothy, how are you? So it's just referenced the value of the input variable, it's substituted it into there. So you can do clever things like, in fact what it will actually do is it will evaluate an expression. So for example, the sum of 5 plus 5 is 5 plus 5. Pretty cool, huh? So this kind of magic here, it's actually evaluating an expression. And in this case we've simply put input, so the result of the input expression is just the variable, which is Timothy, sorry, the value of the variable, which is Timothy. Now the next part, we've been a little clever here. Let's just simplify this a bit. The sum of 5 plus 5 is, and then we use the hash and then the bracket, 5 plus 5 and hash, and you can just print it out like that. So we've kind of jumped ahead a bit, but this is pretty cool and it's nice to know it early on, and I hope you've learnt a little bit about programming, and you can see that it's not actually too difficult, and that if you have any questions, please just please ask them in the comments, and I'll sign off until I do the next one. Bye bye.